Hey traders, welcome back to Valareso Capital. On today's video, we're gonna go through the market update, and as always, we're gonna take a look at the weekly watch list. The purpose of this video is to create a high probability roadmap for next week, and of course, put ourselves in the best position to make profits. If you find any value on this information, guys, remember to subscribe to the channel. And before we start, remember that this is based just on my personal opinion and is not financial advice. So let's take a look right here into the charts. And as always, let's start with the SPX. Just get my drawing tools here ready. And let's take a look at the SPX. Now, before we dive into today's video, I just want to mention what we were talking about in last week's video. We were talking about a possible rotation, a lot of money going into the small caps, and that's exactly what we saw. We're going to take a look at the IWM. We're going to take a look at some of the levels that I'm going to be watching as support levels and perhaps entry levels for some trades next week. But as always, I want to take a look at the SPX first. So right here we have the SPX, and let me just move this anchor VWAP to the swing low that we had right here. So now the question is, what is going to be the expectation going into next week for the SPX? What is really interesting is that before we started the week, we were talking about this call wall at 5,600 in the SPX. We can clearly see that we exceeded that target. So that was a pretty substantial move in the SPX. And now you can see that we shifted, that we also have some really interesting action in the options market, going for perhaps a new call wall at 5,700. Most of the structure continues to be at 5,600, but we could probably see a shift into next week going into that 5,700 level that hasn't happened yet, but it's something that I'm taking a look at. Now, in terms of market structure, the SPX continues to be pretty bullish. You can see that momentum is high. We continue to trend above the exponential moving averages, which is the 8 exponential, the 21 exponential, and the 34. So everything is pretty bullish in the SPX. Remember that we were talking about this breakout, gigantic breakout to the upside. And now the question is, if this was the pullback that we saw, I do think that it's very important to take into consideration that we're going into options expiration. So we tend to see these systematic flows going into the market. And what I mean by that is that as long as the SPX continue to be in a gamma positive territory, you can see that the gamma flip, that the gamma continues to be positive for now all the way to 5,465. As long as we continue to be in a positive gamma territory, then what usually happens is that we tend to see pullbacks that get bought. That is probably something that we can talk about in another video. But as for now, the gamma positioning is positive. The price structure is positive. We are trading above moving averages. So there's no real reason as of now for the market to have some kind of correction. Now, the question is, where can we buy the SPX? And what I'm seeing here is that we continue to trend above this anchor VWAP. As long as we continue to trade above this anchor VWAP, anchor from this low right here, that means that most people that actually bought this dip continue to make money. So I will assume that if we continue to move higher, then shorts, you have to think what shorts are going to do, and they will probably just continue to cover their positioning, which will trigger a new continuation to the upside in the SPX. Now, even if we happen to see a little bit of a pullback going into next week, I do think that this 8 exponential and this anchor VWAP is going to be a really important level of support. That's going to be somewhere around 5,560. And my expectation is that we are probably going to just continue higher and meet this 5,700 level in the SPX. As for the Qs continue to look pretty bullish. And what is really interesting in the Qs, and something that I really like about this, is that the Qs actually came and retested this anchor VWAP zone. You can see that we anchored it from the swing low, and you can see right here that the Qs actually came to that level. So I do expect this level to hold. I don't see any reason that we wouldn't. Also, the Qs also in gamma positive territory. So my expectation is that most likely we're gonna continue to see a melt higher, perhaps into this 510 level, in which we have some considerable structure in terms of positioning. So my expectation is that most likely this will just continue higher. Now let's take a look at the IWM. And what is really interesting about the IWM is that, remember, guys, that we were talking about this structure in the IWM, that it continued to make higher lows and continue to make higher highs, which was the first sign that the market wanted to turn. Now, of course, we had CPI, then we had PPI, and then, of course, that fueled their rally and finally gave us a pretty substantial breakout in the IWM. And now the question is, where do we buy this? Now we do have a call wall at 215, so I do expect that we're gonna see a little bit of pause right here in the IWM, but my expectation is that most likely we're gonna continue higher here. This kind of move that we had is a pretty substantial, considerable move. And usually this is just not a one-day thing. Now, of course, we don't want to get involved when the market is pretty extended, especially when the market is against these very important levels of resistance. So my expectation will be, if the IWM sees a little bit of a pullback, sees a little bit of back and filling, and the last pretty substantial structure that we had in the IWM was 210. So I wouldn't be surprised if we happen to see a little bit of a pullback. You can see that we had an anchor VWAP from the day just before the gap. And that day before the gap tends to be a really important day because a lot of people get positioned before the news event that we have. So I wouldn't be surprised if we happen to come right here. We do have a really strong support, in my opinion, at 210. I think that will be a really nice level to get a little bit of exposure in the IWM, whatever you want to trade it, right? Using calls, using the TNA. And then, of course, my expectation is that most likely we're going to see a continuation higher. Even if we just get a bounce back to 215, that will be a really nice trade, right? That's a 5-point trade in the IWM. So I think that will be a really nice trade. And most likely we will just continue higher. But of course, we have to think risk first. So any pullback, I think that will be the real opportunity. Now let's talk about some setups going into next week. And of course, if you want to take a look at breadth from a different angle, you can take a look at the RSP. You can see that the RSP, of course, had a really nice breakout. And if you jump into the weekly chart, you can see that the RSP is just a gigantic cup and handle, right? You can see right here the cup, and now you can see the handle. This usually tends to be a really positive thing in terms for bullish structure. So I do think that this is the beginning of a move, but of course we do have to accept that the market is a bit extended. That doesn't mean that it cannot continue to the upside, but we have to manage risk accordingly. So I already gave you the levels for the SPX, the Qs, and also the IWM. So let's take a look at a couple of setups that I'm going to be watching. Let me just jump to the list. As for now, I have 16 names here, but I do think that the most important ones that I'm going to be focused on are some names that I already have positions on. That's going to be the Qs, SMH, NVDA, Reddit, Adobe, and Coin. As for other names that I'm going to be watching, I do like these crypto names, which is Hood, Mara, and Riot. And then one that I really like for next week is going to be SMCI. We're not going to cover all of the names, otherwise it will be a really long video. But I do want to go through NVIDIA, SMH. I want to take a look at Reddit, and then of course I want to take a look at these crypto names because I do think that we're seeing some really interesting patterns. So let's start with SMH. It's going to be pretty similar to NVDA. But what I really like about SMH, because a lot of people are starting to call this a double top, and in my opinion, it will only be confirmed a double top if we happen to break these lows, because that's the only way that something confirms a double top structure. As of now, this is a really nice rally that tested the highs and now is resting right here at the anchor VWAP zone, anchored from this low right here. So as of now, this is a beautiful spot for SMH to continue higher into next week. So any move below this 21 exponential that happens to lose that structure of anchor VWAP, then perhaps we're going to see a little bit of a pullback in the SMH. But as of now, This is a pullback that came into the average price paid from this day right here. So as of now, this is a beautiful place to get some exposure, and you're gonna see the same setup on Nvidia. So I do have my level here. I started this position at 128. I do have a stop, pretty tight stop at 123.50 in case we happen to lose the 21 and lose the structure. Then of course that will be a different price action in Nvidia. But as of now, Nvidia is the same. We had a pullback, we came higher. Now we're testing. You can see right here that we're testing the anchor VWAP anchor from the high, and also we're testing the anchor VWAP zone from the low. So that's a really nice spot for Nvidia to continue higher. I do think that we're gonna test these highs. I don't know if we're gonna make new highs in Nvidia, but a test of these highs seem like a really high probability trade. Another name that I'm watching is Reddit. You can see Reddit right now has a really nice setup. This is a really nice IPO base. We had this move to the upside, then of course we have the correction, and you can see right now that Reddit continues to make higher lows as we approach these highs. And now this is a really nice flag that we have here, really nice base. And the expectation for Reddit is pretty simple. I started this position at 70. So as soon as we started to break this anchor VWAP zone to the upside, I started that position, really nice move. And then of course I do have a stop at 66 in case we happen to break to the downside, because we have to think about risk. But as of now, I do think that Reddit is going to start breaking up to the upside, and then perhaps we're just going to see a continuation, really nice setup. And then let's take a look at some of these crypto names. Hood is going to be the best looking one. You can see that Hood continues to trade in this base right here. So pretty choppy action. But if you just anchor a VWAP zone like we like to do, you can see right here that basically Hood just continues to trade in the zone at which most buyers from this dip have positions. So we continue to close above that 21 exponential. I wouldn't be surprised if Hood already shaked enough people to make its move. So this is going to be one of the most important setups that I'm going to be watching. And then of course we have Mara. Mara is looking really nice here. You can see that we continue to form this base right here. If we happen to take out these highs, I do think that we're going to see a really nice move in Mara. If you get your exposure around this anchor VWAP, I think that will be a really nice place to do it. Having a stop below this low, this is going to be one of the most important setups that I'm going to be watching for next week. And then of course, similar setups in Riot is not as clean, but you can see right here that Riot is starting to form kind of this rounding bottom, right? You can see it right here. Perhaps we're going to make a move to test these highs. I do like this setup as well. And then of course I do have a position in coin. It was not my best entry, but I'm looking for kind of the same thing, thinking that this is a double bottom with a divergence in momentum. Let's see if we happen to hold this and then start seeing some movement to the upside. And those are basically going to be the setups that I'm going to be watching. SMCI also looks great. You can see right here that we had kind of a little flag right here in SMCI, looking really, really nice. I do think that we're going to go for this call wall at 1,000. That will be a really nice trade. And of course, all the setups that I'm showing you are in positive gamma territory, which is actually a pretty nice thing to know. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. Just keeping it pretty simple. The market continues to be in an uptrend. We are a little bit stretched to the upside, but only when you're looking at the RSP, which is the equal weighted S&P. But in terms of the SPX and everything, it looks fine. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see an upside for this week. Remember that this week we have options expiration. That's going to be on Friday. And on Wednesday, we have the BIGS expiration, which tends to be a point of inflection in the market, at least in the short term. But of course, the main focus is going to be price as always. And that's going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you next week. Take care and bye-bye.